Youth unemployment rates. For many countries around the world, this statistic is used to determine the health of the labor market and the economy. But now, it's becoming more obsolete. The problem with unemployment rates is that they only take into account those without a job that are actively seeking work, leaving out a crucial piece of the population, those who have given up on working completely. Enter the NEET. NEET is an acronym that stands for Not in Education, Employment, or Training. It encapsulates a much broader demographic and, as the name suggests, includes people who are neither in employment, education, nor actively seeking training. While the unemployment rates have done a good job at decreasing steadily for a long time now, besides 2020, the rate of young NEETs, and particularly young male NEETs, has been steadily increasing. Why is this happening? What are the consequences of this, and what can we do about it? That's what I want to go over in this video. This video is going to start off with a little bit of a surprise. It's become increasingly well known that young men's college enrollment rates are now much lower than that of women's, and I even made a whole video covering this topic. And since that is the case, you would think the logic that follows is that there are more young male NEETs than young women, at least since they started enrolling in college more. But it's actually the opposite. For decades, around 2 times the amount of women from the ages of 15 to 29 qualify as NEETs than men do. Now, most of the reasons for this are pretty obvious. In traditional cultures, women are usually expected to stay home and focus on caregiving rather than a career. Many of these young women have at least one child to take care of, which makes the possibility of getting a job go down significantly. Regardless of this, there's still a different trend happening right now we need to take a look at. In very recent years, we're starting to see the tides turn a little bit, at least for college graduates. While it may not be very apparent in this graph, more Gen Z men than women with college degrees are becoming NEETs, even considering how much higher the NEET rate for women still is in this age group. And that leaves us with a couple different avenues and nuances to explore. There's the reasons why both young men and women become NEETs, and then there's the topic of why young male college graduates specifically are more likely to become NEETs than young women college graduates. So let's start with the reasons for both genders, and I'm going to do this without mentioning the rising cost of college tuition and student debt, not because it's not a valid reason, but because I've mentioned it so many times in the past and I want to avoid sounding like a parrot.
Hey, yo.
Huh?
Why you smell like that?
What do you mean I smell fine?
Well, you don't smell as good as you could.
I'm literally filming a video in my apartment right now. Why do I need to smell good?
Well, what about when you go out? You know how confident you feel when you put on a nice cologne?
Yes.
You know how expensive it usually is?
Yes.
Well, then try Scentbird.
Okay. For the first 25 years of my life, I was not a big cologne guy. For one, bottles can cost up to $300, but also I didn't really see much of a point because deodorant exists. As soon as I decided to buy my first cologne in 2022, everything changed. I felt more confident in myself. I stood a little higher. More people were willing to come up to me, ask me about the cologne, and start a conversation. It was a complete energy shift, and if you want to upgrade your scent and improve your confidence without breaking the bank, you should try Scentbird. It's a fragrance subscription service that allows you to try your first fragrance for only $8 a month, and your next month will only be $16.95. This allows you to change your fragrance every month and avoid the commitment of buying a $300 bottle of cologne or perfume that you don't even end up using. It also gives you more of an opportunity to find that signature scent, like the one you always wear out that makes it feel like you're a people magnet, and I think I just found my new one. This is called Jasada Ambassador, and this stuff smells unreal. It has notes of green mandarin, mango, amber, cardamom, and vanilla.
Oh yeah, it's got me smelling good. Real good.
So if you're interested in elevating your confidence and having a good conversation starter that attracts more people, you can scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or use the code COLE55 for 55%, yes, 55% off your first month at Scentbird. You can get your first fragrance for just $8, and then the next month after that will be just $16.95. So Definitely go to take advantage of that offer, and thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. After the pandemic in 2020, employers were desperate to begin recruiting young employees to fill open spots that were a result of a slow economy. This caused a bit of a hiring bubble as the ratio of job openings to unemployed workers went from 0.2 to a peak of 2. But as job spots started to fill up and vacancies fell, employers began to pull back hiring, trim job openings, and reduce hours. This has actually caused a slow increase of unemployment rates that I didn't mention earlier, and is a natural consequence of a post-pandemic world that desperately needed to get the economy going again. But I think there's more to this than simply a lessening of work opportunities. It's also the attitude around work and the type of work being offered now that we need to factor in. When employers tighten their job openings, they usually only start to look for better qualified employees. In our modern digital age, some of what is taught in our current education system may apply to what you'll eventually be doing in the workforce, but it has been heavily lagging behind the pace of our changing market. Take, for example, the meteoric rise in AI. When OpenAI released ChatGPT in 2022, nobody was prepared for how quickly so many traditional jobs were about to change. It showed us how much was possible with AI, like being able to create images, write code, and do tasks that were typically reserved for multiple employees. And while many companies started to adapt to this change, many schools did not. Technology like AI allowed for the elimination of many entry-level jobs that young people used to get out of college, such as data entry and administrative roles, customer service roles, market research, and other IT-related roles. And on top of that, what colleges don't often encourage are extracurricular opportunities, such as internships or other summer projects. To the average young person, whether you're a graduate or not, it's extremely overwhelming. As soon as you're done studying a degree for an in-demand sector, that sector changes, and then your degree becomes less useful, or in some cases, completely obsolete. And like I said in my Why Men Aren't Going to College video, a lot of these companies in the highest paying job sectors are looking less at degrees and more at what you've created on your own time. Because that signals to modern companies that you're able to keep up with the rapidly evolving career titles and changes that are accelerating like never before. It's like the memes circulating around that show entry-level job postings that list several years of work as a requirement. There's a huge sense of overwhelm from a lot of young people who are confused about whether what they study and apply will even be relevant by the time they get good enough to get a job in that thing. And this leads to another problem that modern life is producing a lot more of, which is burnout. If you grew up as a teenager during 2020, you basically had to put your maturity development on hold for almost an entire year, and many people still report that they have not recovered mentally from that long period of isolation. Then, with many more jobs demanding more working hours outside of the allotted time you're supposed to work, with less vacations, you never have time to recharge and spend time engaging in more relaxing activities. This comes with a lack of social support, as young people are finding it harder to search for and create communities which help give their lives a sense of purpose outside of work. We also can't forget that it's just way easier to stay inside now, not interact with anyone unless it's absolutely necessary to, and get a fabricated version of social intimacy through social media, although some of that is partly a young person's responsibility to break away from. The culture has started to shift away from the more traditional lifestyle of immediately getting a degree right out of high school and then immediately getting a job with that degree, due to the reasons I've listed already, but also because there's less social stigma surrounding living with your parents. You know, young people feel much less pressure to move out at a young age now. While they were suffering during the pandemic, their parents, people around their parents' age who have assets like houses, watch their net worths go way up. And therefore, a lot of parents don't mind giving their child a little bit more financial support for more years than they got. The share of US adults under 25 living with relatives increased from just under 50% in the 1960s to over 70% in 2024. And yes, the gap between the cost of living and average incomes is a huge part in that. It's massive, but we can't factor out the decrease in social stigma around living with your parents or the devaluing of a degree in favor of an ability to adapt to a constantly changing modern job market. However, there's still a part that I'm leaving out that we can't forget. A part that initially struck me as really shocking, but once you let me explain, it will all start to make sense. This is the graph we need to focus on now. While young, college-educated women are sticking with their job searches despite all the changes that are going on, 1 in 5 Gen Z men with a bachelor's degree are now NEETs, neither unemployed nor actively looking for work. Now, when I first saw this, I thought it would match with the exact reasons that I went over when I talked about why young men aren't going to college at all, with the biggest reason being that young men feel a lack of purpose due to traditional gender roles kind of being dissolved and young women being able to be more independent due to those education and employment opportunities. But this article tried bringing in a different perspective, and its claims are interesting to say the least. When faced with unemployment or with a tough job market, women are resourceful and practical about making money in the moment as opposed to just giving up, says Natasha Quaidlin, a sociologist at the University of California at Los Angeles. Perhaps men think that it's not socially acceptable to get these types of piecemeal jobs, that they're not meeting expectations. They want that dream job title, the perfect culture fit, and a supreme compensation package right out of the gate. Instead of being open to decent opportunities as stepping stones, a lot of them would rather ride the unemployment wave while holding out for that unicorn role, says HR consultant Connor Hughes. Is there any truth behind these types of statements? Well, if there is, I don't even think it applies to the young men looking for a traditional job. It's more closely tied to the small subset of men that are heavily influenced by the ultra-rich lifestyles they see on social media. Right now, being an entrepreneur, having a side hustle, or owning a business is the cool thing to do. Men see all these young guys as young as 16 years old making millions online by making TikTok videos, selling courses, or streaming, and they instantly start comparing themselves to those needles in the haystack. It's just a constant stream of media being fed to them, telling them you need to be making this money by this age or you're a failure. Or at least that's what they start to believe, even if that's not what they're explicitly being told. There's this ever-increasing possibility of creating the next big thing or being a content creator, which often takes years to get off the ground. And those men who are pursuing that sort of lifestyle would still be categorized as NEETs. But really, for the majority of these men who are not actively looking for work, the reasons are far more grim. The claims from that article are coming from sociologists and consultants, and they didn't even end up asking the young NEET men themselves why they are no longer looking for work. When you actually ask prime age men why they aren't working, the biggest reason, besides being in school, is that they are ill or disabled. Now, ill or disabled can mean a variety of different things, but what it's most closely related to, based on the data we have, is mental health. Nearly half of prime age men who are not in the labor force take pain medication on any given day, and in nearly 2/3 of these cases, they take prescription pain medication. 1 in 4 NEET respondents in a 2024 UK survey referenced mental health as the reason they were unable to work, and 21% of all young people polled said their mental health had worsened in the last year. Suicide rates among men under 30 have risen by 40% since 2010 and are 4 times higher than among young women. The support for young men to actually do something productive with their lives and the lingering stigma around seeking help continues to paralyze men who, deep down, want to work towards something but are dealing with so many internal issues that they cannot even consider that possibility. It is a completely different world from the one that boomers grew up in, when there was much less demonization around masculinity and many more opportunities that encouraged men to get a higher education. Like I expressed earlier, for a lot of young men, they are still trying to figure out where they fit in this new hyper-individualistic world that is detached from the traditional values that were set upon them. So what does this all mean anyway? Well, employment rates going through cycles are the natural consequence of a capitalist economy, but it's really the underlying systemic issues that are happening right now that are causing young people, and specifically young men, to give up on looking for work for the time being. I don't want to say there shouldn't be any sort of accountability taken from young men, because a lot of them do seem to have kind of unrealistic expectations of how much they should be making right out of college. And yes, wages need to increase. I understand that. But also, you've basically just started learning real world skills. When you've just reached 20, Of course you're not going to be ultra wealthy. You weren't going to be even in the 60s or 70s when you could get a job that paid really well right out of college. And I'm not trying to discourage you from going after your dreams. In fact, there's no better time in history to do so. But you need to have patience and be realistic about how long it actually takes to create a business that thrives, especially if you have no previous experience building one. And for the guys who are just trying to find a great job with great pay that actually treats them well, if you're fine with staying at home right now and waiting for that, I don't think there's really anything wrong with that. Do more of your own creative projects related to the job you want for the time being, build up a portfolio, and hold out for something great if you have the means to do so. But if you really want to start making money now, then maybe you should at the very least pick up a part-time job while still searching for that optimal role on the side. No matter what you work on or whatever career you pursue, you're gonna have to eat shit for a while. There's gonna be parts of it that you don't like and that you're gonna have to persevere through, even in the job that you right now perceive as being the perfect job for you. That's certainly the case for me with my career here on YouTube, but overall, I honestly think it's mostly positive that young people have this opportunity to go through the experience I was fortunate enough to have. An experience that can either include getting or not getting a degree, but most importantly, involves enough time to really figure out what it is you want to do in this life that will lead to the most fulfillment, purpose, and happiness. At least that's what it'll be for some. For others, they will just live with their parents their entire lives because they see no point in progressing in life because the modern world is so doom and gloom on the surface. Would love to hear your thoughts on this subject in the comments below, and I mentioned it a few times, so you might as well check out the video I made on why young men aren't going to college anymore. It ties into this video a lot, so click on it. And again, make sure to check out Scentbird and use my code COLE55 for 55% off.